A common objection to God's existence is that of science, which looks at cultures of the world and says they were trying to explain the world around them. They made up stories that explain sickness and death. Pandora in her box, she opens it and releases all of the evils. Likewise, Eve takes the apple. And so the argument is that cultures have relied on myths and superstition to explain the world, but now we have true knowledge and the scientific method. Many Christians admit you can see this in the Genesis 1 through 3. Mom, Dad, why is there pain? Why are there thistles and thorns? Well, it's because of sin. Mom, Dad, why is there pain in childbirth? Well, it's because of Adam and Eve's sin. Mom, Dad, why are there rainbows? Well, it's because the world was sinful, and so God sent a flood, etc. And snakes, well, they come from the talking serpent who was cursed by God. So one way to respond to this objection to God's existence as a Christian is to actually agree with it to an extent. If you're not a six-day creationist, you might be a theistic evolutionist. That is, you believe in God, but also in all of evolutionary theory. And so you probably see Genesis 1 through 3 as myth, a very helpful story, of course, written by Moses after the Exodus to give us a sense of who we are as God's people, Israel, and who God is. But you would be mindful of the fact that he wrote the Torah in the 1440s, well after the creation of the world, which would have been about 3 to 9,000 years before. And so Moses is not writing history in those early chapters, but rather theology. Now, my guess is some of you don't like that approach, and that's fine. There are other approaches that can be added to that one or substituted. And so let's start with response number one. That is that some religions, let's face it, have lame explanations for how we get here and what the sun is and so on. Take Apollo as an explanation for why the sun moves versus the Christian explanation of God put it there and put the earth in its place and all these things in their place. Furthermore, the existence of the Judeo-Christian God is validated by signs and wonders. Take, for example, the parting of the Red Sea. What an incredible story. It does not have to be taken on faith alone because there's archaeological evidence that supports such a crossing. Additionally, there is scientific support that the plagues of Egypt did happen. Of course, it could have been coincidence, but given the story, it seems logical to believe God was at work. Another response is to say, well, of course, there are myths in every culture. It's because human beings, it is in their very nature to ask these kinds of questions. Why am I here? Who am I? What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? What happens when we die? What's right and wrong? Science cannot answer these questions. Science answers questions like, how fast does the earth spin? And what's the structure of water? But the big questions of life, of human existence, that's in the realm of religion and philosophy. Some say they don't believe because God can't be proven scientifically. This statement reveals a certain set of assumptions, namely those of empiricism, the belief in knowing things based on the senses, what you can see, taste, touch, look at a microscope, telescope. And this was something that came out of the Enlightenment, guys like John Locke, George Berkeley, David Hume, and right up into the present day Richard Dawkins, who says things like, what other truth is there besides scientific truth?
I think if we're talking about the universe, about what reality is, about what life is, then truth means scientific truth, yes.
Furthermore, Richard Dawkins is a materialist. That is, he believes only in the material world. When he has a debate with Alistair McGrath, it's as if he can only get his head around a God or being that is located in space and time, made up of molecules. But of course, the classic definition is that God is eternal, invisible, beyond this world, and therefore you cannot put him in a test tube or telescope. The Judeo-Christian God is not a specimen that you can put in a lab and get repeatable results. He's not a gumball machine where you put your coin in, as a prayer and get the desired outcome again and again and again. That's the scientific method. But that is not our God. God forbids, in fact, to be tested. The devil tempts Jesus to throw himself down from the temple to see if God's angels would catch him, which of course Jesus does not do because he recognizes this is testing God. This is demanding proof of God's existence or love on one's own terms, which is what demanding scientific evidence would be doing as well. This is why the Bible compares the Spirit of God to wind or fire, elements that you cannot control, that come and go as they please. Another response is the design argument, intelligent design. Even though science cannot prove God's existence, it can be used to help make his existence more logical. William Paley coined it the watchmaker argument in the 19th century. It had been around for much longer, since the Greeks, as the teleological argument. More recently, it's called the fine tuning argument, which we'll look at in more depth later. But for now, here's a quick look at a modern version of the design argument. William Paley said you don't take a watch or the watch parts and shake them up and get a watch. It just doesn't happen that way. Likewise, you don't take the parts of a Lego helicopter, shake them up, and get one. You have to have a design. Intelligent design, not random chance.